In today's episode, we take a look at the women who bravely paved the way for so many others in the intelligence community as we take a look into the women who made ultimate sacrifices and showed their bravery by becoming spies during World War II. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, and my agenda is simple. Each week I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. Today I'm really excited to have as our guest star, producer, and of course writer Sarah Megan Thomas for A Call to Spy, her latest film. There's so many things that are impressive actually here, in which, for starters, this is basically an independent film that's a period drama set during World War II showing spycraft. So there is a lot of production value on a kind of tiny budget, and it's really impressive, I gotta say. So I know you're gonna dig that from the start. Also, Sarah's process as a storyteller and writing a role that she knew that she would play is really also fascinating to examine, because it's another great example of an actor wanting to create a landscape that they would feel most comfortable in as a storyteller. So they wrote what turns out to be a perfect role for them. So there is a lot to talk about, and I know you're going to dig this episode. And speaking of things to dig, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine over at www.backstory.net. You could read us there on a desktop or laptop, or of course in our iPad app. And there's a lot to discover in Backstory Magazine, and we're just about ready to publish issue 42, our long delayed quarantine issue. So that's coming out within weeks as well. So, we could use your support now more than ever. So if you've never checked us out, you could read the free issue of Backstory Magazine and decide if you'd like to support us as a subscriber. And I promise you, there's a lot of cool stuff that's going to be in issue 42, and we're going to keep updating as well. But now, without any further ado, let's check in with Sarah Megan Thomas to chat about her latest film, A Call to Spy. Well, Sarah, it's great to have you with us. I dug your film, and I want to go all the way back to the beginning. Tell me about where you studied all this. Did you study acting? Did you study writing? How did it begin?
All the way back to the beginning. Great start. So I went to Williams College, where I was a theater major. And then I studied acting at drama school in London, interestingly enough. Came back home, did a lot of, bartending, Girl Next Door, New York Times commercials, you name it. And wasn't really interested in kind of the types of roles that I was getting, which were, like I said, Girl Next Door.
Right.
And decided I wanted to do a movie. So I went to Barnes and Noble's, back when Barnes and Noble's had like the storefronts in New York City. And I sat down with a coffee and read all the books over the course of a couple weeks on screenwriting, and decided, naively so, that, hey, I can do this, and wrote my first screenplay.
That's awesome. That's kind of like what Britt Marling did in a sense, because she was an actress and she wasn't getting the roles that she wanted. So she realized that she was going to empower herself and create the roles. What was something that really illuminated you? Because obviously you had experience reading scripts as an actress, being theatrically trained. What was something that when you were reading the books about how to write that was kind of eye-opening, or, a light bulb moment for you?
Yeah, I think it was because I was trained as an actress. I knew dialogue that would kind of fit in an actor's mouth. And also I could practice on myself and be like, that doesn't sound right. But then also as a writer, I had to learn the structure, which is so different, which is, as a screenwriter, you write actions, you don't write paragraphs like you would if it was a novel. And so that was like the other item that I had to learn. But I knew as a writer, producer, actress, I wanted to tell these kind of untold female-driven stories in commercial genres, spy genre, Wall Street, sports, etc.
That's great. Well, so just going back for a second, and I'm not in any way trying to traumatize you, but a lot of actresses go out on bad auditions that are just make them question, what am I even doing here? What is the audition that still makes you cringe to this very day?
So it was a Justin Lin movie. I don't remember the name of it. I blocked it out. I'd just gotten back from drama school. I'd come to Philly to audition as like a local. It was the lead in the film. and I auditioned for the casting director, Mike Lemon, and it was like this crime scene where the boat's filling with water. Of course, you have no water. Go. You have a camera. And the first audition was brilliant, and he walked me to the elevator and was like, you're going to get this job. Justin Lin's in town. Don't mess it up. Of course I messed it up. So then, like, for the callback, I have, what is that? Don't Stop, it's Eminem,
Right.
that song, I'm listening to it, I'm 22, 23 years old, and I totally froze. And like, it was awful. And because I did so many commercials, I started looking in the camera, even though I know you don't look in the camera for a movie. And anyway, I didn't get the part. But that was
All right. Well, it's over now. You're back in a safe place. So, I was looking on your credits, and it seems like Backwards in 2012 was your first official writing credit. Tell us how you got that gig and what was important about it for you.
Well, I was a rower in high school and a little bit of college, and I grew up in the Bend It Like Beckham era, which I love. That's one of my favorite, sports rom-coms. And I didn't feel like there were enough movies like that. So when I got to tell this kind of female-driven rowing romance for young kids, it's rated PG, with James Van Der Beek, Dawson, right? It was really a special time.
That's awesome. What was your biggest lesson? What do you remember that going through the experience as a writer this time and actually getting it made? What was something that maybe changed in your creative habits, or something that you learned that you wanted to carry forward to the next project that you learned on Backwards?
Oh, I learned so much on Backwards. I learned how basically the script evolves from idea through the edit room, and that you always have to stay flexible because, whatever you have, you're never done with a script. Whatever you have as your final script in shooting, then you might need reshoots after you test it and audiences are getting this or that. And then you have to shape it in the edit room. You're always rewriting.
That makes sense. That's actually great advice. So then that would bring us to Equity, which is a Sundance film. And what was your lesson there? What was your lesson on Equity after coming through the whole thing?
Equity was a lot of fun. It was the Sundance, and it was back when there was not a pandemic. So we did a very large
2016.
Yes, which was also a lot of fun because you get to connect to audiences, etc. I think the biggest takeaway there was to be proactive as a writer or producer or actor, etc. Like with Sundance, way back before the submissions were even allowed, I wrote Trevor Groth a cold email.
The head of programming. And
head of programming.
How did that work out? Actually, emailing him cold, not knowing him.
He wrote back and he
That's
met
awesome.
with me, and it was just, I said, this is the concept. We're creating this first female-driven Wall Street movie. I happen to be in LA this week. Will you grab a coffee? And he did. And I think he does that with, when he was at Sundance. I actually think, to his credit, he met with a lot of up and coming filmmakers who never had films at Sundance. Yeah. And so what that did is, because the festival game, and I do believe it is a game, is about getting the right people to actually watch your movie. I mean, there's so many submissions, and if one person doesn't like it and they're low down on the totem pole, I don't mean that rudely. I just mean in terms of the festival hierarchy, that's it. Your film doesn't move on. So by having him know about the film, when we went to submit the film, and then we were still in, we didn't finish the film until right before Sundance. So we got to keep submitting, and we had this point of communication where the decision makers were actually watching the film, which I feel very lucky about. But it's a bigger lesson, not just with festivals, which is take the initiative to write the letters and reach out to people, and it may or may not work, but it's worth a shot.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been going to Sundance since 2003, and I'm bummed. Like, there's no way I'm going in 2021. Like, right. And they're not going to be ready, and they know it, but they're going to do some live events in Utah. I've started seeing emails, but they're going to do a lot of virtual events like the other fests. But that's great that Trevor reached back out to you, and you had no previous contact. He's an amazing guy, and he left to go film produce. So, I'm sure that he's going to continue rocking it there. Well, finally, we're coming to your idea for A Call to Spy. I know it is the most over-asked and boring question, but what did give you the idea for this, just so we could get a baseline?
Sure. So it was back to this kind of concept of what genre do I want to tell? And I was on press tour with Equity and Sundance and Sony Classics when I was like, I know I want to do a spy drama. I love James Bond movies for what they are. Love them. Great entertainment. I love Charlotte Gray, great entertainment. But at the heart of those films, there's a lot of like special effects that are the drama, great beautiful people in costumes, and romance. And I was kind of interested in, let's take it to a different level. First of all, we're an indie film. We could never do the special effects and the car chasing. So that's out of the question. There's no D-Day. We can't afford it. So forget about it. Not Dunkirk. But then above and beyond that, I thought you could do a really interesting psychological thriller about what it's like to be a spy day in and day out, not knowing who you can trust, knowing you have a 50-50 chance of survival, the loneliness of it. You have no one to talk to. So a more internal spy drama. And so that's when I lensed into these women in Churchill's Secret Army.
That's awesome. I mean, we're going to get into the spoilers in a while, but just for our listeners that haven't yet seen the movie, you're focusing on three real women. You're focusing on Vera Adkins, who was kind of leading up the spy unit with the folks in Britain, in London. And then you're focusing on Noor Khan and Virginia Hall, who were both recruited. Now, what's so interesting is that each of these three women have such rich lives of their own that you could have easily done this as a TV series. You could have done it as three separate movies that were intersecting. When did you get the idea to put it all into one?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these women can and should have. Is that me? It's me. This keeps happening. So sorry, it's not my cell phone. It's the house phone. I'm moving this week. So I'm literally at my parents' house because we're moving apartments. And anyway, that's the landline. So welcome to Zoom. So back to the...
Good to know you're connected.
I mean, who has a landline? My parents. So that'll ring for a while. But okay, so back to the question. They can all have biopics on them, and they should. But for me, with this film, what was really interesting is that these three women are from different nationalities, different backgrounds, different religions, and they united to resist this common cause. And I thought that that would lead for a more global story and reach a wider audience to all the heroic people in Churchill's Secret Army. Also, they were firsts in their field, which I thought was really cool. Virginia was the first female field agent. Noor was the first female wireless. And Vera was the first and only female spy recruiter, and the real life inspiration for Miss Moneypenny and James Bond, interestingly enough.
Is she?
Yes.
It's so fascinating because she's so much more active than Miss Moneypenny, who is cool, but overall in the classic Bonds never really had a chance to do much. In the more recent movies, Miss Moneypenny has gotten to do a little more, but that's amazing that it was Vera who did so much. She's not just answering the phone.
Nope.
Well, okay, I have a question. So at the beginning, there's a title card, and it says, inspired by true life stories. And so, using the word inspired rather than based, like what's the deal with the title card like that, just for our writers out there?
Oh, that's a great question. It's actually a legal question in that, there's
Right.
stricter legal guidelines when you say based on true stories. So if you want to play it safe, you obviously want to say inspired by true stories. If you are diverting from the facts, in any significant way. And for this film, I was really adamant that we had to stay true to the facts of the life arc of all three women, because this is the first movie on them, and I wanted to stay true to their lives. I put Noor and Virginia together in time and space. They never met. They were 2 years apart in the war.
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, to explore these broader themes of different types of women, different their diversity proving critical to their success. So it's not based on that as a true story because they never met.
Right, because I was going to say inspired by usually allows you to use more dramatic license. And I think it also is a legal way of indicating that you did not get any underlying rights. Whereas based on might represent that you had an option or, some sort of a deal with the estate or the family to get a book or something officially. That inspired by is a looser, more unofficial term used for public figures. Would that be the correct way to say it?
Absolutely. Like, this is not based on anything other than spy files and historical records and talking to living relatives, but then also my imagination, so that's why it's inspired by.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Research. I love research as a journalist. I love it as a writer. Tell us about your research process, and especially one of the things that some writers could fall victim to, which is getting lost in the research and knowing when it's time to write. So tell us about your journey on your research.
Well, that was a problem for me. Yes. Yes.
Everybody, not just you.
Everybody. Oh my gosh. And there would be times when I'd be looking at the research and you bang your head against the wall, like not literally, but figuratively, that just like, oh my gosh, I want to put this in. And I would put things in and then take them out. It goes back to your question earlier, about the whole process and how you have to constantly write and rewrite. But that was a big challenge with this one, because not only were there the spy files, which are kind of what letters they wrote back and forth to London when in the field, but also—
Sorry to interrupt. Where did you go to get access to those?
A lot of different people. So that was a contact in London specifically that I had, who became our SOE consultant. But then I also wrote the OSS Society, which is the precursor to the CIA. I got their files, spoke to the CIA. Virginia was the first woman to work for the CIA. So the CIA opened the doors to her living relatives. It was really just you open one door and then everybody else starts to open other doors.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But so anyway, I think what it came down to is at a certain point, I did put the research away. And I just said, you got to go to the script. I do readings with friends a lot, which the first one, makes you cry because everybody hates it. You're like, oh my God, cut the first 10 pages. Okay. But then also you go back to the research, and I went back to the research a lot when I needed to, and even in the edit room to kind of check yourself.
I guess, how long was your research period? How long did you allow yourself?
I research and write at the same time because I'm the type of person that needs to make progress, even if that progress goes into the trash, like just the way my brain works. So, I did a couple of months of research on the idea and all that kind of stuff. But I had the first, 10 pages written at the same time after I'd done that kind of initial ballpark 3 months.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'm going to get into your creative habit for a second. How important is outlining to your process when you sit down to write?
Not very important. So, I do some outlining, like inciting incident, right? You got to have it. You got to have it clear. You got to have it before page 10, like end of act 1. Like I do outline, but what I don't do, and I make sure I'm hitting those markers, but what I don't do is outline everything in the plot from beginning to end. Like I had no idea how this movie was going to end. No idea.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I had 2/3 of it done and I was like, now what? Now what's going to happen?
No, that's cool. That's cool. Well, actually, just every writer has their own different markers that they like to hit. You said inciting incident before page 10. What are some of the other markers that are important to you? Is it basically knowing where your act breaks are, your midpoint? What are some of the other things you pay attention to?
I think the first 10 pages are crucial. And I think having the first 10 pages where you set up your leads, whoever your leads are, and that inciting incident. And I think that the inciting incident has to be super clear. It's that taking that character onto the next journey. It's your whole movie, and setting up your character before that journey so that you have a biggest change from the characters in the beginning of the film to the end of the film. So those are things that are really important to me. But then also the act changes and the ending, where you're going to leave an audience. I leave a little bit more leeway kind of in the middle of the film because you still have to hit certain markers and obstacles, etc. But I think there's a little bit more room to be creative and finesse as long as you have the structure of what your story is and what your hero's journey is.
That makes sense. When you sit down to write, do you give yourself a page count to hit each day, or do you try and write for a certain amount of hours?
Neither.
That's okay. There's no one way to do it. So that's why we love asking these questions. So what's your habit for when you sit down to write?
I'm most productive in the morning. I call it between 9:30 and 3:30. So in terms of creativity, but I also produce and fundraise. And so there's other hats that have to be worn and act. So, I take it day by day, and I don't put the pressure on me because I know, or I believe that the film's going to get made, and I'm the one fundraising and trying to make it happen. So, I just go as the process demands, and there may be a week that I'm only focused on the script, but frankly, I might not have that luxury because you have to raise the money and you have to hire the crew and you have to hire the cast and all these things have to be done as well.
Well, actually, let me put it to you this way. Before you're doing those steps, you obviously have to complete your script. So in that stage, when you're really just doing that first draft, do you give yourself an hours a day kind of deadline or pages or no there either? Okay,
No,
so how
I'm
long
like
did
a
it take?
workaholic, so I just work and then like if it gets done, like I love to write and I love the creative process. So I don't feel the need, like if it's not working one day, that's okay because I'll work on Saturday and Sunday and I'm also a mom and like fitting it all in. Um, I'm pretty laid back on that because I do work a lot of hours anyway.
Okay, well, so how long did it take to get your first draft?
2 months?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. That's a great pace. And so
Yeah.
how many drafts would you say it went through by the time you were taking it out?
400?
No, that's cool. So it just kept
Yeah.
evolving.
I'll tell you a really funny story on how I believe I learned to write. My parents are both lawyers. And when I was in high school writing kind of English papers, my mom would red mark them with a pen to the point where I couldn't read them. And her comments were really great. Like you'd want her to write the paper for you, but her handwriting's terrible and you couldn't read it. And she'd be like, oh, just say it in your own words. And it would be like, no, like what you said was so good. I want to go out and play. And but my parents were very strict with me growing up about every single word. And I think that's where I learned to write.
That's cool. During the pandemic, I'm asking this to writers now that we're all stuck at home, quarantining, hopefully, and you're stuck in different Zooms. How has your writing habit changed, if it has, during the pandemic? Because
I find it much harder, much harder. I have a first grader who's at home, schooling at
sure,
home, and while teachers are working really hard, Mondays are asynchronous learning days, so there's no school, and there's on average 2 hours of time a day where there's one-on-one learning. So, and it all needs monitoring. And my husband works, and then promoting this film, etc. So I found it like so challenging, to be frank, because you don't have. Whenever you write, you do need quiet.
yeah.
I need quiet personally. You need like that area, and there's not a place I can go to for that area in the pandemic either. You're all in one place. My husband's working from home, so I don't know how writers are writing right now, to be honest.
No, it's tough. It's tough. I mean, it's good to hear that you're still finding a little time for it. I guess the last question I have for you is, what do you do when you get writer's block? If you get it, how do you battle it?
I'm an athlete in my personal life, and I find that with all obstacles, like whether it's doing yoga or cycling it out, whatever, just getting away from it. I am also a big believer of share your work and get other people's opinions, and you don't have to take everything. Different people have different views, but you usually find a gold nugget that will really help when you're in a jam.
A lot of writers kind of have different issues with how they take notes, and obviously it's always suggested to be objective about it and not be offended by notes of if it's a scene that you love. Do you collate notes? Do you have anything that you've done that like is like a special way that you get through it? Because some people they keep like literally a running tally. If someone complains about a scene, they mark, okay, scene 5, got a complaint. And if they're seeing like, okay, all my friends are complaining about scene 5, clearly something needs to change. What tricks have you found for navigating notes?
I think that's a great one, and I certainly use that one. I'll give you an example with A Call to Spy. Virginia Hall is really famous for a prison break. And so I had a prison break in the film. It's different than how she did it, low-budget filmmaking, but it's still there. And I was thinking, how do we break her out of prison that's low budget? And so I researched all these ways that spies were broken out of prison. And one of them was like through a loaf of bread that you put in the keyhole and then you mold it. And I thought it was really cool. But when I started sharing the script, everyone was like, so how does that, bread in the keyhole when it hardens? And so I didn't want to drop it. But after so many people were like, this doesn't work for me, I don't believe it, I dropped it. And now it's another version of how spies were rescued, which is actually through Monopoly games. And they'd hide, and this is true, they'd hide like wrenches inside games because with the Geneva Convention, you were allowed to give games to prisoners.
Right.
So that's just an example of like, sometimes you have to let go of what you think is a great idea if it doesn't resonate with tons of people.
That's really fascinating though, because I was going to bring that up later, but actually since you brought it up, I don't really think it's that big of a spoiler. What's interesting to hear you say is that it came from something in Virginia's life. But what's interesting about the scene in your movie and this isn't a dig at all. I'm really just curious how it tracks for you, is that Virginia's not involved. None of your main characters at all are involved. And you definitely show how to break someone out of jail, which was her suggestion. But I was curious what made you decide to dedicate that much screen time to it, because it did not have any of your protagonists. So I liked it. It was cool. And it was really cool to see the authenticity of it. But it's interesting because it's a time in your movie where with 3 female protagonists, you were suddenly introduced to a new character that was doing it, which is rare. So that's kind of why I liked seeing that as a sidebar.
Yeah, I think because Virginia Hall was so famous for a prison break that could technically take up the real estate of a whole movie, if you wanted to, but we didn't have the funding to do anything, epic in terms of a prison break. This was low budget filmmaking. What I wanted to do is have the drama of what it's like to be in prison and be rescued, if in this scenario they are, because it could happen to any one of our spies, and it does happen to another spy later on. Yeah. From an emotional standpoint. And then in the shooting of it, we didn't know, to be honest, how much would end up on the cutting room floor, because the actual prison break, like you shoot it and you see what works. And we found that audiences found that an interesting kind of spy tense moment of will they or won't they, and how are they using this Monopoly game? Will it really work?
I want to talk about your habits as an actor for a second. How important is it when you get a script that you didn't write to break it down for your own character? And then when you have written a script and you're taking one of the roles, do you do additional research and backstories for your own character?
Definitely. So I find it much easier to do a breakdown, interestingly enough, for a script I don't write, because I have the time. I'm just acting. So I can really, get in there with one hat, and I have more time to experiment, would be the word, like throw paint at the wall and try all different things. The benefit of writing and playing the role you write, though, is that I felt really connected to Virginia Hall because I was writing her words specifically. So that was a benefit on that side. But in terms of my process as an actress, this one was the hardest role I've ever played by far, not only because of the prosthetic leg that she had, the wooden leg, and the physicality of that. My back went out. I ruptured my Achilles tendon after shooting and couldn't walk for like a year. I mean, it was insane. So yeah, so not only the physical aspects of playing the role, but also just because the pressure, which I'm sure many actors feel, of playing a real life hero for the first time, a real life hero who never gave any interviews. So you don't have access to hearing her speak. Even if you talk to the living relatives, Virginia didn't talk at length about her war experiences. So you're guessing based on the research. And at the end of the day, like we talked about with the research and the script, at the end of the day, I had to drop, you do the research as an actress, and then you have to drop it and be in the moment and be you and bring you to the role, or I think it doesn't work.
That makes sense. And we'll talk about some of the physicality in a second once we get into spoilers, because I don't want to give too much away. I will say, tell us about your process of selling it, because it's always, especially for a film like this, what was your budget? What was your schedule? And what was it like to get somebody to say, yeah, we're going to back it?
Well, if I told you my budget, I'd have to kill you like a spy. So I'm not going to tell you that.
Are you able to say if it's under 10 or over 10?
Well, under 10. Well, under 10. Yes.
Under 5 or over 5?
You're getting no.
All right. Your interrogation resistance techniques are good, my friend.
But in terms of schedule, it was like 33, 34 days, very quick. We shot in largely in Pennsylvania and Budapest, believe it or not. So we couldn't afford like London and France, so to speak. So we found these other locations that work really great, actually. What was the other question?
Just selling it, getting the backers, like getting that green light.
Sure. So, I work through tax credits. So we had 25% tax credit. I funded them before, so I know how to get the tax credit in Pennsylvania, and individual investors. And I'm really, really lucky that equity made a profit. So I had a lot of investors from the equity pool sign up again, which couldn't have done the film without. And then I had to go out with a business plan and fundraise and get double the investors, because this was a bigger budget. And I was able to connect with the Indian American community, who were very excited about seeing Noor Inayat Khan's journey. And I was able to connect with spy fans and my college community. So I went to Williams College, and I would write people and say, I'm a Williams alum. This is what I'm fundraising for. Do you know anyone? And then once you get people on board, they throw parties. So that was the fundraising process. And then in terms of the selling, the pandemic was crazy. And I think it was for everyone. Like, just when I'm selling this movie, everything's being shut down and no one's buying film.
Oh, okay. So that's when you were trying to sell it.
Yeah. And
Got it.
like, we just won the Anti-Defamation League Award at Santa Barbara. We'd come off an Audience Choice Award. We had all these festivals lined up that went virtual, which IFC doesn't do, but also couldn't do, without a distributor. You don't want piracy. And it was really, really challenging because it's who's going to buy the film. And I did want some kind of theatrical. I mean, this is really a theatrical movie, so that's heartbreaking. But IFC, I wrote them a letter. I wrote them a note just back to Trevor. I wrote an email to IFC and I said, this is the film. And
it was knowing that it was a cold letter?
Yes.
Wow.
And
you are clearly one of the best cold letter writers out there.
Well, it doesn't work all the time. I'm telling you when it works.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my intern dropped off a DVD, came back, didn't hear, followed up, and then got that offer. And then in the meantime was getting actually a couple other offers. So we had a couple offers to kind of choose from. But I found that IFC was so innovative in the pandemic with the Drive It. Like, I loved what they were doing in terms of connecting to an audience, small screen and big screen, and that it's a female-led distribution team. Like, people don't talk about that enough. Like, when you look at the distributors, they're largely men. And so I was really excited to partner with that female-led team.
That's awesome. I mean, because they also need content. That's the other lesson of the pandemic is that, you have a film that was shot that's in the can. So that actually is good for you. Were your investors happy with this film as well, the way you guys sold it?
Yes.
Okay,
and we have, IFC's doing North America, but we have a UK distributor and a theatrical there on the 23rd. We have Australia. We're doing India. So it's a real global film with a lot of partners.
And so you said you had a 25% stake that you were able to get via tax credits in Pennsylvania, because it's just so funny because here in California, no one's ever made a movie in California, so we don't have tax credits like that. But Pennsylvania, of course, have a 20. It's just crazy to me that nothing like that is available easily in California. So how difficult was it to learn that system and how it works?
It's really difficult the first time. So backwards, I've done all my films in Philly. So now that this is my third, it's very easy, but it wasn't at all the first time. And Sharon Pinkinson, who runs the film office here, is incredible in helping to facilitate, especially since, I bring films back here often. But what it is it's a 25% credit. That doesn't mean you get 25% because you still have to sell it and get a loan against it. So it ends up being like, I don't know, 20, 21. But there was also a 25% tax credit in Budapest where we shot a little bit of the film as well. So combining the two credits, I used it as a financing tool where, I didn't have to raise that portion of the budget.
That's great. All right. Well, so podcast listeners, Zoomcast listeners, however you're watching this, if you're watching it on YouTube, press pause if you have not yet seen the movie. Go find a way to see it at a drive-in or go see it on a small screen near you. You could rent it anywhere, a Call to Spy, and then come back and listen to the rest because we are going to get into the spoilers. So this has been your spoiler warning. So press pause now if you don't want the spoilers. So, you alluded to it earlier. It's not really that big of a spoiler. Virginia has a wooden leg. And as an actor, that's, a challenging thing to play. You did some special effects where you were able to show yourself cleaning the apparatus and you had a leg missing and that looked great. But you also had the physicality in which if I was getting my geography right, you were hiking through the Alps to escape later in the film, or definitely some mountainous range. So what was it like to do that with this manufactured limp that you had? And you were definitely really out there. The locations that you were using just looked great for wherever you were.
Well, actually, this is a really funny story about the Pyrenees Mountains. So we didn't have the money to go to the Pyrenees to shoot this. And Virginia Hall, historically, Klaus Barbie came into France to chase down, quote unquote, the limping lady who was called the most dangerous of all Allied spies. And she hiked over the Pyrenees with this wooden leg, that she wasn't born with. She shot herself off in a tragic hunting accident with her father's rifle when she was 27 and vibrant, with that wooden leg. And when we were shooting it, it was March and we're in prep. And we have snow in New York City where we're prepping. And we're like, oh man, this could be the last snowfall. We got to go this weekend. So it was like run and gun upstate New York, like 2.5 hours from New York City in 3 inches of snow. And we shot all of that first. And then those were the special effects we had in the movie, placing Pyrenees mountains.
Yeah. It looked great, by the way.
Thank you.
Those effects looked great.
Yeah, they did a really, really good job with that. And but doing the limp, that was the biggest challenge. We had a number of ways with the leg. We actually ordered online like a prosthesis, a wooden thing. It was very heavy, and we did cutouts and put it on my leg and tied it to my back, and then my back went out. So we had to, because it was super heavy, it was like 10 pounds. So then we did styrofoam. We did all kinds of different things, because even in the close-ups, even when the camera wasn't on me and I was acting with my fellow actors, it was very important to me to have the leg on, because it's who she is. She named him Cuthbert, and it's a part of her. And so I didn't feel like I was Virginia Hall unless I had something on my leg. I'm breaking in really quick to just remind you to check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net.
We are just about ready to publish our long delayed quarantine issue. It's our pandemic issue. It's packed with a lot of deep reads, a lot of deep dives. So we could really use your support now more than ever. So I hope if you've never read us, you consider checking us out. You could read us on a desktop or laptop, or of course through our iPad app. And you could read the free issue that way. That's the easiest way to check us out. And if you'd like to subscribe, we would absolutely love your support. It will help support the writers, editors, our art director, and, keep the magazine going during this kooky pandemic that we happen to be in the midst of. So thanks for considering checking out backstory.net and Backstory Magazine. And if you would like to save $5 off a subscription, you could use code SAVE5 over at backstory.net, and that'll get you everything you're looking for. So thanks for considering it. And now let's get back into our chat with Sarah Megan Thomas about A Call to Spy. One of the things that you did with structure was interesting, in which you start the movie off in a German interrogation with your character getting her head dunked in water and stuff like that. And then you flash back to 3 months earlier, and then eventually time catches up and we realize that the interrogation was a simulation. When did you get that idea? Was that something that was on the page or something that you discovered in the editing room?
That was on the page, and that was actually something from the first draft that we didn't lose. I really wanted to get into the movie very quickly, and I liked the concept of, I was fascinated by the historical fact that they actually trained these spies, like tortured them to train them. Like they would hire these military people to come in and get these women and men in training and scare them and see if they would break. And I found that one of the most fascinating, human psychology things. So I wanted it to seem like, she gets caught, she gets tortured, but really later you learn, oh no, they were just training her. So that was in the script.
I had a great uncle who was involved in the French Resistance, so it was really cool to see all that in the movie. What was like a favorite story that you just found in research but you weren't able to fit into the movie? Because I've always been fascinated by the French Resistance, especially going against how people were literally turning in their neighbors for cash. I mean, the imports of the French Resistance was, huge.
Well, people were turning in their neighbors for cash. There was no food, and I think, they were starving. I think what's funny is not funny, but all the wine was being taken by the Germans who don't even drink wine. And so it was like this big insult that they're taking our wine, even though they don't, drink it or want it. But, what I found relevant that kind of is in the script, but in a different way, or scary is the word I should use, is if you're British and you go into spy in France, even if you're fluent in the language, but you have British habits, like you look the wrong way for a car crossing the street, or you have the wrong label, or you're carrying the wrong cigarettes, or cigarettes have been banned for women because it's a brand new law, you're caught right away. And there were so many stories of that that are fascinating. One more that was really cool that we did shoot but cut because we didn't need it, is the concept that these women and men constantly thought they might be being followed. So the visual of, or the paranoia of, because you could be being followed, that innocent person's following me and it's a nobody, and the stress day in and day out that must put on you.
One of the and that would be a lot of stress, but I could see how maybe for time you had to lose it. One of the things about a film like this is that it's almost like a war procedural, a spy procedural. And in this case, it didn't have a centralized antagonist other than, the Nazis. But it was interesting because you chose Father Robert Alish, if I'm pronouncing his name right, who was a traitor. He was a priest. I guess he obviously had a problem with prostitutes, and the Germans were blackmailing him. And so basically he was killing a lot of spies in the network. How did you arrive on him as kind of your antagonist that you could pin things to?
Yeah, so that's historically true. So he was someone in the spy files of Virginia Hall, who Virginia wrote back to London about and wasn't sure whether or not to trust him because he was a priest and his accent was a little off, but all her local contacts were saying that's common. He grew up near the border, and actually he was flipped and an evil person. So he went on to spy for the Germans, and he had a prostitute problem and they paid for his prostitutes. All of this is true. And I just thought what was interesting about him is he's a priest, and yet the nuns really did help the SOE agents with safe houses. This concept of good and evil, and it can come in the same place. You can have a church where you have nuns helping on one hand and a priest who's a traitor on the other.
That makes sense. It was a good character, and it was sad to see everybody betrayed the way they were. Sticking in that kind of religious zone, it was also interesting for you to illuminate Britain's anti-Semitism problem, which was definitely still a problem during World War II and remains a problem all the way till today. And it was fascinating to see Vera go through that when she was, providing so much important service for her country. Where did you land on that? And was that some of your research on Vera?
Totally research, historical. She was Romanian and Jewish and had to hide it within her own spy organization, the people who hired her, because of anti-Semitism, because she wouldn't have been able to do her job if everyone knew she was Jewish. So I thought that was a really important part of her character and had to be in the movie. And I also didn't know myself, when I was doing the research, that there was anti-Semitism in 1941 London. You just assume, they're the good guys, there's anti-Semitism in Germany, but it doesn't exist. I'm not personally Jewish. I didn't know that. And I felt terrible that I didn't know that. And then when we did test screenings at NYU, et cetera, about like how much do younger people know about World War II and how much do you have to put in the movie, again, nobody knew that. And I just thought it had to go in.
Yeah, it was a great thing to put in there. I was really glad that you did. You show Virginia killing one person, and it was a interesting moment in the movie. It was a big character moment. It's at the end of the prison break. Because they finally get out, but then they're almost busted. Were there other stories? Did you have to debate how much violence to show from her character, or was that kind of her big famous kill that maybe happened in a different way during the actual prison break?
So we don't know whether or not Virginia Hall killed anyone or not. It's not in the spy files. It's certainly not something discussed or confirmed or denied. We do know that all the recruits were trained how to kill with a knife, how to kill with a gun, how to kill with their bare hands. And again, this being kind of a psychological thriller, so to speak, with the killing, I wasn't interested in her just killing someone. I was interested in the psychology of being a citizen, an individual, not a military person who's fighting battle day in and day out, and your first kill, because they said, the first kill is always the hardest. That's what they taught them in training. So I don't know if that's fact or fiction.
I mean, you handled it right, and it would seem like probably she would run into some violence at some point in all of her service. So that was interesting. Another thing that was interesting was that you took the real life setbacks that she had, and she was just a go-getter that wouldn't give up. And so when she finally makes it back to London and they say, you're out, we're not sending you, and she was upset about that, it was great to see her go change, her status and become a wireless woman so that she could help with the radios and then get involved in D-Day. And it seems like if I was tracking right, there's about a year and a half in there. And, you went through it fast because that was the purpose of the movie, because you were tracking 3 stories. Was there anything that you wanted to put in during that year and a half of what else she was doing, or would it have just been anecdotal training?
I think it would have been anecdotal. There's so much that, you have to leave out. It goes back to your earlier question of history. I'll give you an example. When it doesn't answer your question specifically, but I think it gets there. So when Virginia hiked over the Pyrenees, she actually, when she got to Spain, went to prison because she didn't have the right documentation. She was in a Spanish prison for several months. Finally, she made her way back to London and got out. Those kind of details, again, if it doesn't advance the plot of the movie, had to come out. I didn't even write the Spanish prison bit, but in terms of her being a wireless, what was important to the story was her connection to Noor, and Noor being missing as a wireless, and how she thought the spy system was inefficient because they didn't have enough wireless who were their communicators. And so that was really the relevant point. Plus, it was kind of the end of the movie that you're kind of tying everything together.
Going to Noor again, you have a wealth of material when you're tracking 3 protagonists that are historical figures. I was researching it a little. Noor was in Dachau, the concentration camp, for 10 months. And again, that could have been its own movie. But of course, as we know, we're in the spoiler section, she did not live. So there's very little information on what would have happened, what did happen beyond what the camp records were show. Did you ever want to show how much time had lapsed for her? Because in the movie we get the sense that time's passing, but you could take it either way. Actually, it wasn't entirely clear. I don't mean that in any way as a dig, but it seemed like a concentration camp movie would have been a different movie. And I'm just curious if there was more to her at Dachau that was cut, or that basically just showing her.
We actually cut very little of Noor because all the stuff was really necessary to her journey and to the plot. I think what was really important to me to keep, which is historical, is that she tried to escape twice. So we do have her trying to escape twice in the movie. In terms of the length of time that she was there, that was less important to me. We've all seen, what was really important to me is we've all seen these World War II movies, and I wanted to not dwell on things that we've seen before, that we've seen a lot of times. And with Noor, her last words were liberté. That's in the film. So again, staying true to everything that happened to her. But the timing, the amount she was in there wasn't as crucial, I would say,
sure,
as what the heroism, like not giving anyone up, being tortured, all the things that happened to her while she was there.
It's always good to subvert genre when you can. And in a spy thriller that has female protagonists, a lot of spy thrillers, especially with female spies, include their sexuality as being part of the story. And it was actually refreshing that really had no place here. Even when at the beginning, when Virginia's with the doctor, I'm like, oh, are they going to go down this path that maybe there's a budding relationship or something? But aside from respect for each other, you didn't. Were there ever any notes that you had to fight about making sure that there was no love stories? Because I was actually glad that there weren't. Not as if I'm opposed to love stories, because there could be great love stories during war, because it adds to the pressure cooker of it all. But I commend you on not going down that path here.
Thank you. That was a real conscious effort. There was, and we did shoot a little bit more of a romance between the doctor and Virginia. It wasn't like, they're in bed together, but that what it explored is the conflict of having feelings for someone when you're not allowed to, and you're not allowed to have the time to explore that. So there was a scene where they, kiss and go away very quickly, but in test, because we didn't know, if we are going to need that material or not. And it was cut very quickly. Back to what you said, which is that's not what this movie's about. And you just don't need it. And that goes back to what is in most spy films, even Charlotte Gray, it's a romance at its core. And I love romances, but that wasn't really the goal with this story.
It's always interesting for a writer to get notes from their director. You've finished your script. Talk about working with Lydia Dean Pilcher and what kind of notes she gave you as a director, as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very important process working with the director because you're working with their vision on your script and you have to collaborate. And that's how you're going to come out stronger and better. Obviously, it's always challenging when you get notes like we talked about before, and you have to go away and put your ego down and be like, okay, these are really good notes and let's come back to the table. She really brought the global storyline and the stakes of the war out in her notes. Like those were some really great notes that she gave me, making sure we're tracking what's going on in the larger landscape of the war. And, Lydia's work, she's done so many films as a producer globally, with Mira Nair as her director. She really understood this story and these women's journeys in such a personal way. So it was easy.
That makes sense. Did you have to do any rewrites during production? Because aside from being, one of the stars, you are still the writer. Did anything come up that you needed to rewrite?
All the time. And that's why I said, very often, an actor comes on set, you do a read through, you talk through the lines, you have an idea, there's like a location, you're like, wouldn't it be great to get that shot? So it was done all the time.
Okay. Editing is the last stage of storytelling, and I'm curious what you learned about your story via the editing process. Things you needed to cut or things you needed to also reshoot for clarity.
I love the editing process. It's actually my favorite process. I think editors do not get enough credit. I think they
Totally.
Are just the bomb. But we had an amazing editor on this, Paul Tothill, and it was a doozy because half of this film is on the cutting room floor because it could be a mini series. There's so much material on these women, and navigating with him and Lydia and myself, how to interweave it was crucial to the film's success. We did do 2 days of reshoots, which is kind of what I do in all my films. And they were largely the resistance montage. We didn't have any material of her building a resistance at all because it was scene, low budget filmmaking. So we had to go back and get guns and do like a gun shooting sequence and do here's the money, here's the bomb, that kind of thing. But we definitely did reshoots, and Paul brought so much to the table. He actually edited together something that wasn't in the script. It's only like 1 minute, but in the beginning of the film, there's a mini montage of Stana Katic, Vera Atkins, like building her spy recruits, and that wasn't in the script at all. And he pulled it from shots, and it really helped set up the world very quickly.
What was the scene that you hated to lose? Something that would end up on a Blu-ray or something like that. But tell us the creative lesson of why it was important to lose it.
You know what? I think everything on the cutting room floor deserves to be there. I think so.
Of course. Was there a performance moment of your own that you hated to lose? That you're like, oh my gosh, I gave it all to that scene. Yeah, nobody sees it.
Absolutely. Every actor, and I'm sure if you spoke to every actor in this film, all of us had those moments that are not in the movie. For me, after the killing, there was like a scene between the doctor and Virginia that was a very emotional scene because she's just killed someone, and it got replaced with just that one bathtub shot for many reasons, timing, etc. So that one I was sad to see go, but you got to do it. I am as brutal with myself as with others. I even cut my son out of this movie, who's 7 years old and was an extra and just happened to be in a scene that doesn't belong. So I'm pretty brutal in the editing room, to be frank.
Wow, that'll put him in therapy now. It was all your fault.
Why aren't I in the movie?
well, so how about this? What was your toughest scene as a writer and as an actor? And it could be different. And then most importantly, how did you creatively rise to the challenge? How did you take the block or whatever was in your way and get around it?
So the toughest scene was when Virginia comes back from the Pyrenees and finds out that her entire circuit has been compromised. Nobody knows where they are. They may be dead. Nora's missing. And by the way, you don't have a job. We don't need you anymore. And that was challenging because I felt like she would be very angry, even knowing Virginia, the human, in all the research. And there's that balance of being very angry at personally not being able to do something when all your friends are dead or missing, and being likable. And I hate to use that word, but there were certainly takes where Virginia's attacking. I'm attacking Vera and Buck in a not nice way. And we did find a middle ground, but it was very challenging for me, the actress, to find the balance in that scene. And that's one of the scenes. We didn't get many takes on this film. We got like 3 takes on average, really. But like that was one of the films where we did get one of the scenes where we did get like 9 or 10 takes, because the balance of that crucial scene was very hard to find.
And then what was your toughest scene on the page? The one that you kept dreading, kept sweating about, had to return to a bunch of times on the page to get right as a writer?
I would say that it was the scene between Virginia and Noor, which we actually did reshoot without Noor, because Noor was in India at that time, Radhika, a few lines when Radhika goes to Paris and they part ways for the last time. And I think I, as the writer, had a very difficult time finding a way for them to say goodbye that felt appropriate, because that scene's fiction, and I really struggled with it. So in the end, we made it short. But that was one that like kept me up at night for a very long time.
So you just kept coming back to it, and essentially the lesson there maybe was that you learned what the bare bones of the scene needed to be rather than keep it long. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, I mean, at one point it got very long, and it didn't work for any number of reasons. Where we shot it, when we shot it on set, it was the last thing we shot. We ran out of time. So when we shot it originally, we just ran out of time, and the script scene was not very good when we shot it, to be frank. Like, it was the weakest link. And then when we wanted to redirect the scene and their relationship together, having the whole movie, Radhika was in India. So, I had a body double and a small crew to just kind of maybe get a few new lines. And then the technicalities of putting them together were very challenging. So at the end of the day, we decided to do bare bones, get it done, but not sit in a scene that ultimately, in my view, didn't really work.
That makes sense. I mean, I'm sure there were a million lessons, but what would you say was your biggest lesson on this? What was something that, the light bulb went off, as we like to say, and that you might add to your creative toolkit moving forward as a writer or as an actor?
I think just don't take the highs or the lows too seriously. There's a lot of highs and lows on a daily basis in filmmaking, whether you're a writer or an actress, and to just breathe and take it day by day and keep going, because, at the end of the day, you'll make the film, you'll complete the film, it will get out there, and there are days when it feels like all those things won't happen, and just keep trucking.
What's next? What have you been working on next? Do you have another script that you've been plugging away on, or something else coming up you want to tell us about?
Well, I really want to make this into a miniseries.
Oh, good, because I was going to ask, with Virginia?
With everybody. I think there's
okay.
like with the women in SOE, and also follow, like I set it up as a sequel, which would have to be done kind of at Netflix or Amazon, someplace with a bigger budget, with D-Day, et cetera, in the aftermath, and Virginia being the first woman to work for the CIA after the war. So there's a lot more I think could be done with this specific story. I did just have a baby, so that's part of my journey for the rest of this year. Once this press is over, but then I want to explore another true story in a popular genre. Interested in love stories specifically, and I'm also interested in directing and looking at some stuff there. So we'll see.
Would you be directing stuff that was written by other people, or would you write to direct your own material? Do you have a preference?
I don't have a preference at all. It really just has to resonate with me on a level where I feel like I would be the right person to direct it, because I have the life experience that's relevant to the story.
One thing I forgot to ask you earlier that just dawned on me is, since you were theatrically trained, what is your standpoint on set for how much rehearsal should be done, either in pre-production and on the day, versus, do you endorse it because you were theatrically trained, or are you against it? Because I've spoken to a lot of film actors that didn't have theatrical training, and for some reason they have a very bad view of rehearsal. They think it could take some of the energy out of their character. But the actors that have been theatrical trained think it actually embellishes their characterization, many of them. So I was just curious where you sat on that, because it's always interesting to hear.
I love rehearsal, and I think, unfortunately, there's not enough time for rehearsal on indie films as there could be. I think it's really beneficial. That said, I also think it depends on the relationship of the two characters. So, for example, if you're lovers, husband, wife, best friends, I'm a big advocate of as much time as you can spend together while you're shooting, going to dinner, just knowing that human being for the unspoken.
To build familiarity, yeah.
Yeah, versus like, if you don't know each other on set, or you're antagonist or something like that, then maybe not getting super friendly on the days you're shooting, not in like a method way at all, just in a kind of vibe way.
That's great. Well, Sarah, you've been very generous with your time. I dug your film and can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks for hanging out today. Thanks for talking about it.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you for all the great questions.
Thanks. And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to Sarah Megan Thomas for being so generous with her time to chat about her latest film, A Call to Spy. I really hope you check it out because it'll be something that you'll be glad that you watched, so you could find it through all the regular streaming services that you would find to watch anything these days online. So definitely keep an eye out for A Call to Spy. Of course, while you're surfing around online, don't forget to check out Backstory Magazine over at backstory.net. You could read us on a desktop or laptop, or of course through our iPad app. You could test drive us by reading the free issue over there at backstory.net. You could even save $5 off a subscription if you would like by using discount code SAVE5 in your checkout cart over at backstory.net. And look, what could I say? Of course, it would mean a lot to me and of course to my staff to have your support over at backstory.net during these strange times during the pandemic. So thanks for considering checking us out and subscribing to Backstory Magazine. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2020. All rights reserved. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.